Welcome to the Dadcast Extra episode. Today we speak with Sean Novak, a dad on special assignment whose child shares the exact same diagnosis as our executive director and founder, Jeremy Warren. Today, Sean talks a little bit about the diagnosis and when he received it, but more importantly, how his faith carried him through one of the most difficult times he's ever gone through. Also, he highlights the importance of how this brotherhood of DOSA actually made a difference in his life and how it can help you too. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, first, Sean, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. Really grateful for you to take time and share your heart, share a little bit of your story, and appreciate you being here. But Sean and I actually met several years ago. In fact, our wives were pretty closely connected. They knew each other from therapy, and then through the course of just being connected with other families at therapy, and then our wives getting to know each other, and then fast forward several years, Sean and I discover that our kids have the exact same diagnoses, which is extremely rare. And Sean, I know you originally came to our Dosa Bixby group the very first time, and I was trying to recall really how that had happened. So I'm sure you're going to be able to share a little bit of that. But yeah, Sean and I go back several years. He's got a precious family, and I know my wife really loves his wife dearly, and he's been a core part of DOSA.
What are the odds that you guys have got the same, that your children have the same diagnoses? First of all,
It's really low. I mean, but surprisingly, in Tulsa, there is one other boy that has Pura syndrome. That's in Broken. That's older. That's in his 20s. And then for a little bit, there was actually another young girl that was in Tulsa as well before they moved to Kansas City. So, like, having four in Tulsa was crazy because, like, when Gretchen was diagnosed, she was the 69th in the world.
wow.
Not the United States, the world. So that's pretty small, framework to work from there.
Now, Jeremy,
Right?
just by numbers, where was Landon at? Do you know what number he was?
And I don't. I don't have that information. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I know currently, Sean, isn't there somewhere around? I mean, what's the number now? Is it?
I think in December they published that there's over 800 worldwide now. So it's still a super rare genetic disorder. It's growing because the standard for genetic testing is moving away from like the old blood test and different like panel tests to whole exome sequencing, which is what we did when we discovered that Gretchen had Pura syndrome, and that was 3.5 years after she was born. Obviously, it was much longer for Jeremy and Landon and the family to find out, but uh, there's children now that are getting diagnosed in the NICU, days and months, after being born. So it's like, which is incredible because now those kids and families can have services at much quicker and kind of get an understanding of what they're dealing with much quicker. Which is a blessing because like we didn't know, like Jeremy didn't know, so you're operating from what what the closest what it closest mirrors, which for us we were like all of our medical team, which is large, like a lot is they closely use cerebral palsy because a lot of the same um, you know symptoms or characteristics of delayed physical movement, etc., and low muscle tone, etc., are very common with
Yeah.
cerebral palsy as
Now,
well.
I want to go back because I mean, you're going to go through. I mean, I'm sure you and your family went through a whole range of emotions whenever, when your daughter was diagnosed. Um, Talk to me about whenever you received that initial diagnosis. I'm jumping in both feet here.
Yeah.
So, just yeah, I mean, because
Yeah.
that's why guys come in here and they listen to this because uh, there's going to be someone who relates exactly to your story. But tell me about
Yeah.
that initial diagnosis and just
Yeah.
kind of what that did for you and your family.
Yeah. For me, specifically, it was relief, and I feel like when I talked to my wife Angie, we were both relieved, just like actually being able to put a name to what it is, what she was going through, and then um, that there was actually a small community of families that had um, came together, formed. They started as a Facebook group, and which is still very active today. Um, and just being able to learn, hey, we're not alone, um, is very strong. So uh, I think that was like the initial reaction, and then of course after that it was I'm a Angie's a very plan oriented person. I'm a I'm an IT person, so I'm an IT architect, so I have to be plan oriented. So like going and researching like what is Pura syndrome, just understanding what the initial characteristics that are listed. There was already a published study, from you know 2014, so um, which was a year after Gretchen was born, but I mean, there's published study, and then just connecting with other families and listening to them and listening to what worked and what didn't work, and just and even within Pura syndrome, there's such a wide range of disabilities. So like I know, Jeremy has shared about Landon's, has, seizures and, his seizure activity. Um, Gretchen has never been diagnosed with seizures. She has shown at times different seizure-like activity. So more of like the absent seizures where she just checks out, right? But so I think just having, you know, access to information, and then knowing that there is a community that really helped relieve, give some relief, because I think the 3 years leading up to the diagnosis was the battle. That was the like not understanding what was going on, just trying to figure out, you know, what we were dealing with, go wade through like how to get services. Eventually, we had the state of Oklahoma, is flawed in many ways, but one of the ways that they are not flawed in was, providing. With Gretchen being in a NICU for 38 days, they provided us access to sooner care and sooner start, for children with disabilities. And so being able to have someone that was like a not they weren't in the medical field, but they were basically a care liaison that they 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 said get signed up for DDS, get signed up for the Little Lighthouse wait list, all these other things that really helped to enable us. That was the battle before the diagnosis, and the diagnosis was a
Yeah, I can
relief, I think.
imagine. It just gives you okay. This is it's like the pinpoint. This is where it is. That's what we were with Lindley as well. Even though you suspect, you have your suspects of oh, it could be this, could be that, could be this, could be that, but um, getting the moment where it's okay, this is what we're dealing with. Probably took a huge weight off your shoulders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, just access to the medical community too, and besides parents was just. But at the same time, our medical team, a lot of them, other than our geneticists, who we had at the time, did not know what Pura syndrome is. So we're teaching them as much
Yeah.
as we're learning. So we learn something and then we teach them. But like our geneticist was actually on the published paper about Pura syndrome. So that was pretty cool. And then that he actually connected us with a family that was in western Oklahoma. He couldn't give us names, but he said, "Hey, there's another family that sees me that's from this area of Oklahoma, um, that also has Pura syndrome. If you want to try to, find them." And we actually did through the the Facebook group I mentioned earlier, and just made a good connection. That was before we knew we knew Jeremy and the family at the time, but we just we didn't know we were actually had such
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
close
for sure.
connection.
Now, as a dad, you probably dealt with a range of emotions as well. Um, kind of, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through just briefly? I mean, don't you don't have to go super in depth, but just like what were kind of the overarching range that you went through? Because I know from personal experience, whenever we found out with Lindley, I was like, oh, she may never get married. She may never, I may never get to walk her down the aisle. I may never, I did the whole I may never scenario, you know,
Yeah.
and, and I still do that from time
For
to
sure.
time, to be honest. And it's, you can't let yourself go there,
Yeah.
obviously, but what was like the thought process from a dad's perspective that you were dealing with? And just kind of go there for a second.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. Like, because dads and men just overall, not doesn't mean, necessarily have to be a dad, but, men have to, or have this, um, you know, um, you know, requirement to be a strong, capable person with, you know, um, you know, don't show emotion. And like I'm a very emotional person. you know I can start talking about Gretchen and start crying. I mean, like, you know i've I've already kind
Yeah.
of done it already, just talking to you guys, because I love talking about her, but then like just the emotions of talking about her, and so like I was open with that. you know I just I just said, you know, this is a raw thing that we're going through. And so if I cry in front of you, then just, to my friends or whatever, family, like just support me, just be there, because like being an emotional as a man should not be, uh, shouldn't be seen as a weakness. And oftentimes it is, of course. And, you know, I, I, you know, obviously there's times where I did have to be strong, and, because we all have wives. So they're much, I would say Angie is very, while she's very strong and in a lot of ways, she is also very emotional too. And so like being able to be a supporter in those times, rather than being that raw emotional, but then also at the same sometimes it's actually sharing in the sadness and sharing in the crying, and just it's showing that we're together. We're not, um, we're not two individuals that are apart. I mean, that's I think that that side of the emotions has to be shown as well, and to really show a good, that we're both together and not, we're not fighting a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
battle,
Well, sometimes that emotion,
because
or not the lack of emotions, but the release of those emotions can be a strength, because it's like
right,
for my wife, it's like, hey, are you checked in on this? Are you, and it lets your wife know that, hey, I'm right there with you. I'm feeling the same things you are, you know. I think I think that may be
right,
for me, the biggest thing was I was the same way. I can't let Tara see this. I don't want to see the kids see me cry, because I'm like you. I'll cry at the drop of a hat. I cry at Rudy. I was watching a show the other night. I was watching a show the other night, one of our regular shows. I'm not going to mention the show, but Tara looked at me. She goes, "Are
uh,
you crying?" I was like, "Yes," you know, and it's just a regular
yeah,
Wednesday night TV show.
yeah,
And she's like, "Why?" It's like, I don't
yeah,
know. I can't explain it, but I think in this
yeah,
situation for our families, it just shows that we're all connected and all on the same page. And I think that's maybe what our wives need to see
yeah,
sometimes. Um, just kind of let that guard down.
yeah,
What do you think about that statement? You just need to let your guard down.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely times where if she would, there's one instance where we're in the NICU, and we're at St. Francis here in Tulsa, and the the children's center, part of the NICU, um, you know, we're probably like 20 days in, and uh, they have a big in the NICU area. They have a big like glass atrium where you can kind of go to for some, you know, to get out of the room, and Angie was staying up there like
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And then what I would do is I was going to work, and then I would come home or come over at lunch and give her a break, or come home after come to the hospital after it was done working. And she was sitting there in the atrium, and she was just crying and bawling, and just she was had that I could tell she was also
Mm-hmm.
having a spiritual battle. you know she was yeah, here it is. Get a little emotional now. So yeah, she was, questioning, you know, questioning things, and just like so. I shared in that with her, because I was also having those same questions. Like we were both we're both very strong Christian uh, people. We've been in the church for been saved, been you know, uh, you know, uh, but when you're in a time like that, sometimes you start questioning everything. But I think like what actually came through that like is our emotions, while we can question things, that we can cry together, and we can just you know um, that God was there with us in that time, and that you know really when we looked, really kind of sat there and prayed together, that helped, kind of give a relief to that emotion. And just like, being able to stand on the rock is as a foundation, and just saying, look, we don't know why, and you know, you know, because, but we know that, you're here for us, and um, that help that kind of gave the relief, is just going through an emotion, crying together, praying together, and then just realizing, hey, we may have questions, and we can, you know even we can blame God. We're kind of in that mode right at the time, and but I think it came out that, like, hey, you know, God is a father, and he doesn't want this type. He doesn't want to bring us this kind of pain. So I think it really then would kind of gave us a relief, sharing the
At what
emotions
point did
together.
that pain turn into joy or happiness
So,
with your daughter?
you know, I'll probably get emotional about it too again, but um, you know, the day we went home, you know, 38 days in the NICU. Um, Angie is a German teacher. Um, um, at the time, she was teaching at Bixby High School and Bixby Middle School. Had a very strong German program. German club was like one of the biggest clubs outside of like the athletic club, and she had like hundreds of students, involved because she made it fun, and you know, she's a wonderful teacher, and the way she was, um, she's like, she wasn't gonna quit even though we had Gretchen, and she prayed to God and said, hey, God, if I'm not supposed to work, then you're gonna have to take this job away from me. And what happened is, we're on the way home from the NICU after 38 days, and Bixby calls her and says, "We're closing the German program." And the the overwhelming like sadness as she's holding Gretchen, and she's crying, but then she's just like, and then it was just like a wave of, wow, God answered my prayers. This is what I asked for. This is the relief I've needed. And so like that overwhelming sadness, but then immediate like wave of joy was just I have this picture that I took of her, and it's so raw and emotional, and it's just I love every time it comes up in our memories, and May, beginning of May, or in uh let's see, actually it'll probably be coming up here. I'm trying to think. It'll be coming up here in just the beginning of June. So like, because Gretchen was born in end of April, so it'll be coming up. And every time it comes up, I just love seeing it because it's just that you could see in her face both emotion, the raw emotion of sadness, but also the joy of God answered my prayers, and He kind of took this burden off me from having to go work so that I can be with Gretchen and be the best mom for her in this time. And I think that you know that was joy. And then every little thing after that, the wins in therapies, getting access to different things, and just seeing, even though it was delayed, like seeing the progress that she made, those like it's just feels like an overwhelming joy, and each time something happens, and we all have to celebrate those wins, no matter how little they seem, because uh, you know we don't know, you know you know how how much more wins we may get, or how what may develop in the future. So you got to be in that time and celebrate those
Is
moments.
there is there a verse or something specific that's kind of carried you and your family through this? Because I mean, for me, Jeremy, and you, obviously, our faith is a big part of our lives, and living that out each day. But is there a specific
Yeah,
verse that's given you strength?
yeah, yes. And Man, you had asked me this and I was thinking about I was actually thinking about this last night. I was like, I should have put that in my notes because it's one that I recall often, and um, and I even worked up a a, a picture of Gretchen with the verse, and uh, man, I'll, I'll have
Yeah,
to
send it to me. Send it
it's
to me because
basically
I want to use
saying
it,
that,
but eventually. But yeah, but
yeah,
what
for sure.
do you know? What do you remember? What the verse was by chance?
Yeah.
Just you didn't have to. You don't need
I
the
mean, it's
address. Just
essentially saying,
give me the nuts and bolts of it.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's essentially saying that, that through God, that, you know, no matter, it's basically like saying no matter what is going on, that God is the rock and that He is the light that shines through. And, and I liken that to Gretchen is the light that shines through.
Hmm.
Because she is a child of God, so she's that light. She's so, all of our kids are so just pure and
Yeah,
innocent. You know, no, some more than others, but Gretchen is. I mean, because I know other dads, that it's obviously a different struggle, and so you know she's for me she's that light, that child of God that just
yeah.
really
Well,
shines
let's
bright.
talk about DOSA for a minute. Um, tell me how you found out about
Yeah,
DOSA, and then just what the community of men means for you. Because I know you're active on DOSA Connect because you can't always go to an in person meeting, you know. Um, but
that's right.
what has that been like for you having this group of men?
Yeah, so Jeremy was when during the intro he was mentioning about you know when I started, and you're right, that was back in Bixby before it even moved to Evergreen, I believe, right? I'm trying to remember and then I was trying to recall where like how did I really think it was um Jeremy's wife and Angie, um she's like, hey, Jeremy started this uh you know men's group, and it's on this day and this on a Saturday, and usually Saturdays were tough, you know, because we have we have two older boys now in their 20s, but at the time they were, you know, in their teenage years or early teenage years, and they were highly active in sports. So like sports is always on Saturday mornings. No matter what sport it is, it seems like basketball, soccer, baseball, hockey, etc. And yeah, so we were always doing that. Um, it happened to the first time when I looked at it, um, after Angie told me, uh, I looked at the dates, and I was like, I think, we didn't actually have a sports activity that weekend, so it worked out. I showed up, and Jeremy and I connected. Yeah, I mean, we had met before, but it wasn't like we hadn't really
Mm-hmm.
connected, and um, you know, and so uh, I went to that first one I went to, and I just if, I'm not a one that just sits back and I love listening, of course, and taking it in, and but I like to participate, so like talking and getting it, jumping in there and getting involved, and that's one of the big things is like that docent, all the docent dads, like some obviously come in and just want to listen and take in like that other dads are going through the same thing they're doing, and just take it in, but like, and that's a great way to just kind of get through some emotions themselves. But you know being active has been my way to kind of get through emotions as well. And I know Jeremy and I had talked about the Dosa Connect years ago, like, because again, I'm an IT guy, so I was like, man, if there's a way to do an online one, because I couldn't always, like I mentioned, I couldn't always go to the in-person event just because of all the of activities. And then now, we have a younger daughter now that was born after Gretchen, which is, that's a you know, also is, I know a lot of men, have problems with, having another child after having a child with disabilities. But, that's been a conversation in DOSA, that exact thing right there. Or one of the ones recently was talking about, uh, uh, oh geez, I'm thinking of the special needs trust. And Angie and I had already done it, so I kind of talked about like what we did, and hopefully and I know others shared, that. I mean, but that's like having other dads talk about what they've gone through and like what they've done or access to resources. That's the number one thing. And I Gretchen went to the Little Lighthouse in here in Tulsa, and it's wonderful, wonderful. And I know Landon went to Little Lighthouse too, right? So it's a wonderful, place for kids with disabilities. It's a great Christian atmosphere. But the one thing that was far missing for me was there was no, like, I was, uh, available a lot of times in the morning, and there would be what they call it, a parents prayer group. 99% or 100% was the moms and so the few times that I would join, it would be just I would be the only guy. So, and then you didn't really connect with the dads that were there, that had kids there. I mean, and so like that was like a missing piece. So Dosa has filled that missing piece when Jeremy eventually started up, and I'm so glad that to have this great group of men to share with. And I've always loved being able to attend in person and go to the conference. A little early plug for the DOSA conference coming up. So I've been able to go to the conference a few years, and I'm looking forward to this year. Looks like I'm be
Yeah.
able to go. So um, DOS has been a great addition to
Well, my
the
last question,
support.
just because I want to honor our time again, but um, how important is it for men to be involved in kind of the daily decision making about what happens with their children with special needs? How important was that for you? But then also, could you speak to other guys because they're listening to this going, I mean, I don't even know where to start. What do I do? And how did that translate for you and Angie?
Yeah. So you know, um, to me, you know, being a being highly active in decisions of her care, whether it be a new therapist, a new medical doctor, um, a school. Like we're right now we're been talking about moving and building a house. Today we're in a two-story house that really doesn't support Gretchen's needs, and so like moving and building something, or because it's so hard to find a single story or mostly single story home in Tulsa. And so like building is probably the one area that would is going to make the most sense. Um, to meet her needs, especially because she does use a wheelchair a lot more now, even though she can walk and she's, um, you know, but she has more access when she's in a wheelchair, and so we find ourselves more and more, utilizing that. But like being active, um, attending every school activity that has inclusive, like does she goes to union schools here in Tulsa, and she's been in the musicals, and being involved, showing up with our family, showing up with me and Angie, and being there, going to the parent teacher conferences. um, all of those are important things for us men to not just take a backseat role. We got to take an active role and be a team. I mean, yes, does Angie do a lot more, um, than I do? Yes, but part of that is like she's a teacher, so she's doesn't work the same hours I do, um, and so she does spend a lot more time doing therapy. But you know what? What I do is I support her in different ways. So like she gets me access to the medical notes or the notes from things. So and I put them in, um, put them in a digital footprint, and so we can consume it easily. So like when someone goes to ask us a question, I like, okay, I can we can easily look through that instead of like looking through notebooks or bulk, folders and whatnot that a lot of people do. I know some people are very organized, some people are not organized at all. I just say, I that's one of the things that could say to dads is be active. You are a subject matter expert in your child. You know, it may not feel like it, but you are. Be active, get plugged in, try to learn as much as you can, not only alone, but with your spouse, and just um, try to understand like that there's services available. Seek out those services. um, you know if it works out, great. If it doesn't, you've at least turned a book, and understand it maybe that you don't qualify for it, but at least something that just go seek out, because there's lots of available services. And I think people get overwhelmed that they're alone and that there's nothing available to them, but that's not the case. Just get active. Look for resources. Look for other parent groups, like we being around other families with disabilities. Like there's people that don't have a the Pure Syndrome Foundation. Um, they because even though there's hundreds of people, and they just like didn't have the organization. So like, okay, they have a Facebook group, but get involved with that. WhatsApp chat, a Signal, whatever. Get involved, get connected, and that's the best way that for me to share with the other men. You know.
Thanks for listening to this extra episode of the Dadcast. We hope you found some hope and encouragement in this episode today. And if you know a dad who is on special assignment, make sure you share this episode with him as well. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, please do so. And make sure you hit the notification button so you know whenever we drop a new episode. Thanks for listening. And if you are a dad on special assignment, this ministry exists for you. See you next time.